They called her Whale Girl at Sunset Beach High. They laughed when the fat teenager sketched bikinis while hiding behind the lifeguard station. They never imagined that those same trembling hands would one day dress women across 5 continents in swimwear that celebrated bodies instead of apologizing for them. This is the story of how Charlotte Reed turned a childhood of coastal cruelty into a fashion empire built on salt air, stubborn dreams, and the refusal to stay invisible. Charlotte grew up where the Pacific meets prejudice, a small Southern California beach town where your body was currency and hers was deemed worthless. While other girls posed for Instagram in string bikinis, she sketched them from the shadows, her pencil capturing the confidence her flesh could never embody. But one French photographer saw something nobody else did. She saw genius in those sand-stained notebooks. She saw revolution in a rejected girl's designs. If you believe that our deepest shame can become our greatest strength, hit that like button and follow this channel, because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances, unexpected partnerships, and the devastating power of proving everyone catastrophically wrong. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, to a girl who learned to create beauty while drowning in humiliation. Charlotte Reed was 13 years old when she learned that her body was something to be ashamed of. She lived in Sunset Beach, a coastal town 2 hours south of Los Angeles, where tourism meant beautiful people descended every summer like gorgeous locusts, lean, bronzed, wearing swimwear that cost more than her mother's weekly paycheck from the beachfront hotel where she worked housekeeping. Charlotte loved the ocean with a fierce, complicated devotion. She loved how dawn light turned the waves silver pink, how the salt air made everything smell like possibility. But she hated how her thick thighs chafed when she walked, how her stomach created rolls when she sat, how every summer was a reminder that her body didn't belong in this paradise where she'd been born. Her sanctuary was observation. While other kids played volleyball and surfed, she positioned herself behind the old lifeguard station near the tourist resorts, watching visitors with the focus of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. She noticed everything. The cut of a one-piece that made a woman stand taller, the drape of a sarong that moved like water, the confidence that seemed woven into expensive Italian fabric. Her sketchbook was her constant companion, pages filled with careful pencil drawings of swimwear she'd never wear. She drew the French tourists in their chic, high-waisted bikinis with retro sophistication, the New York women in their architectural one-pieces from designer boutiques, the rare Japanese visitors in their elegant rash guards and swim dresses. Each sketch included annotations in her careful handwriting. Ruching creates dimension without apology. Asymmetrical straps draw eye upward. Bold prints create confidence, not camouflage. At home in the cramped apartment she shared with her mother and younger sister Emma, she'd spread these drawings across her twin bed like precious artifacts, studying them by lamplight. Her mother, exhausted from scrubbing toilets for wealthy tourists, would pause in the doorway. "Baby girl," she'd say softly, "why do you torture yourself with things you can't have?" But Charlotte didn't want to have them. She wanted to understand them, to decode the mysterious language of confidence they seemed to speak fluently while she remained silent. School was different from the beach. There she couldn't hide behind structures and observe from safety. There she was visible, vulnerable, a walking target. Madison Taylor was the architect of Charlotte's torment, a girl whose mother owned the town's most exclusive boutique and whose father managed the largest beachfront resort. Madison had inherited her mother's razor-sharp cheekbones and her father's casual cruelty. She moved through Sunset Beach High like it was her personal runway, a pack of equally beautiful girls following her like devoted disciples. "Look, it's Charlotte the Whale," Madison would announce loudly whenever Charlotte entered a room. The nickname had started in 7th grade and stuck like wet sand. "Did you swallow a surfboard, Charlotte? Or is that your natural shape?" The laughter that followed was always the same, performative, designed to establish social hierarchy with Charlotte firmly at the bottom. She learned to keep her eyes down, to navigate hallways like a ghost, trying not to disturb the living. The microaggressions were sometimes worse than the obvious cruelty. The way girls would subtly shift away if Charlotte sat near them in the cafeteria, creating an invisible contamination zone as if fat were contagious. The teachers who praised her artwork but gently suggested she might be more comfortable sitting out during PE. The boys who looked through her like she was made of glass, present but unworthy of acknowledgement. Once in freshman year, a transfer student named Ryan smiled at her during biology class. Her heart had performed an entire acrobatic routine in that moment. But by lunch, Madison had claimed him, and Ryan never made eye contact with Charlotte again. She learned to expect nothing, to want nothing visible, to exist only through her pencil moving across paper in the margins of teenage life. The worst day happened when Charlotte was 16 during the annual Junior Beach Day, a school tradition where the entire junior class spent the last Friday before summer vacation at Sunset Beach's main stretch. Charlotte had worn board shorts and a loose tank top over her swimsuit, planning to keep them on all day. But Madison had orchestrated something special. "Why are you so covered up, Charlotte?" she'd asked with syrupy sweetness as classmates gathered near the volleyball nets. "We're all friends here. It's beach day. Take off those clothes and have fun with us." Before Charlotte could refuse, Madison's friends had grabbed her arms while another yanked at her tank top and shorts. Charlotte struggled, but there were 4 of them, and they were laughing like this was all just playful fun. Within seconds, she stood in her old, stretched-out swimsuit, the only one she owned, bought 3 years ago from Target, while 60 of her classmates stared. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds before the laughter detonated like a bomb. Someone shouted, "Free Willy!" Another voice, "Call Greenpeace. There's a beached whale." Madison was filming everything on her phone, tears of laughter streaming down her perfect face, her expensive swimsuit from her mother's boutique fitting like it was painted on. Charlotte ran. She ran past teachers who turned away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. She ran past the mocking voices that chased her like seagulls after discarded food. She ran until she reached the lifeguard station, her old hiding spot, and collapsed behind it where nobody could see. There, she sobbed with a violence that scared her, each breath tearing out of her chest like something was breaking loose inside. She cried for the girl she was, for the body she couldn't escape, for the life stretching ahead like an endless horizon of humiliation. The salt on her face was her own, not the ocean's. "I hate them," she whispered to the rhythm of the waves. "I hate them, and I hate me, and I hate this body, and I hate this life, and I hate that I'll never be anything but this." The words felt dangerous, like speaking them aloud might carve them permanently into reality. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to contain feelings that threatened to drown her from the inside out. In that moment of absolute despair, she truly believed she would never be anything but this, the fat girl who drew pretty things but would never be pretty herself, who loved the beach but wasn't allowed to enjoy it, who existed on the periphery of a life she could observe but never inhabit. The video would spread through school, through town, through social media. She knew this without checking her phone. She knew because that's how these things worked in 2018. Your worst moment became everyone's entertainment, preserved forever in the digital amber of the internet. But somewhere in that crushing darkness, something else flickered. It was tiny, barely noticeable, like a single star appearing at dusk. It was a memory of her grandmother's words from years ago, before cancer took her. Charlotte had come home crying about her body, and her grandmother had held her tight and said, "Baby girl, the world will tell you that you take up too much space, but maybe the problem isn't that you're too big. Maybe the problem is that they're thinking too small." Charlotte hadn't understood it then. She didn't fully understand it now, but it was something to cling to, a small piece of driftwood in overwhelming water. She pulled her ever-present sketchbook from her bag with shaking hands and opened to a blank page. Drawing was how she survived when survival seemed impossible. She drew a swimsuit for a girl like her, not a swimsuit designed to hide or minimize, but one designed to fit and flatter a fat body, high-waisted bottoms with proper support and beautiful construction, a structured top with gorgeous details instead of apologetic plainness. She used patterns she'd observed on elegant European tourists, bold geometrics, beautiful florals, designs that caught the eye with intentional confidence rather than desperate camouflage. She added notes in the margins, for bodies like mine, for girls who deserve to feel beautiful without apologizing for existing, for the ones who've been told they don't belong at the beach where they were born. The act of drawing began to slow her ragged breathing, to organize the chaos screaming in her chest. This was what she did when the world became too much. She created alternative versions of reality, one sketch at a time. She didn't know yet that this particular drawing would be the first in a collection that would transform her life completely. The sun was setting when she finally stood up, her sketchbook clutched against her chest like both shield and weapon. Her eyes were swollen, her face was blotchy with dried tears, and her heart was still shattered. But she had drawn something beautiful. In a life that constantly reminded her of her unworthiness, she had created something worthy. It was such a small act of defiance that nobody would even notice it, but it was hers. And as she walked home through the dimming light, past tourists dining at beachfront restaurants in their carefree vacation clothes, Charlotte made a decision. She wouldn't let them see her cry anymore. She would keep drawing, keep observing, keep creating, not because she believed anything would actually change. She wasn't that naive, but because it was the only thing that made the unbearable become bearable. The only thing that whispered, in a voice so quiet she could barely hear it over the ocean, that perhaps one day, somehow, this pain might transform into something else entirely, something powerful. The video of Charlotte's humiliation got 1,400 views in 48 hours. She knew the exact count because classmates kept updating her, like tracking the score of a game where she was losing. Did you see it hit 1,000? Someone shared it to the SoCal Beach group. Each milestone was another small death. But something unexpected happened on the third day after her humiliation. Charlotte didn't cry. The tears had simply stopped, replaced by a cold, crystalline anger that felt completely different from any emotion she'd experienced before. It was clean and sharp and clarifying, like ice water shocking her awake. She sat on her bed, surrounded by years of sketches, and realized something. Madison and her perfect friends would graduate, would move on to UCLA or USC, would continue their beautiful, easy lives. But Charlotte would still be here in Sunset Beach, still fat, still drawing, unless she decided to make a different choice, unless she decided to fight back, not with words or confrontation, but with creation. She began researching with the intensity of someone preparing for battle. She saved her lunch money to buy fashion magazines from the bookstore in the next town. She discovered fashion blogs, YouTube channels about pattern making and garment construction, forums where independent designers discussed technical details. She learned that pattern making was entirely different from just drawing pretty pictures. She learned about fabric draping, about how different materials behaved when wet, about how swimwear construction was actually one of the most technically difficult areas of fashion design because garments had to withstand chlorine, salt water, sun exposure, and constant movement while still maintaining their shape and appearance. This knowledge felt like power accumulating. While her classmates were mastering calculus and memorization for the SATs, Charlotte was teaching herself a skill that seemed almost magical: the ability to transform flat fabric into three-dimensional confidence. Her first act of quiet rebellion was small, but significant. Instead of hiding in oversized hoodies and baggy jeans, Charlotte began wearing clothes that actually fit her body properly. She couldn't afford new clothes, so she learned to alter what she had from Goodwill and clearance racks. She took in seams, added interesting details, created outfits that acknowledged her curves rather than attempting to hide them under fabric tents. The transformation wasn't about becoming smaller, it was about occupying space with intention rather than apology. She walked differently, shoulders back, eyes forward instead of down. When Madison whispered, "Charlotte the Whale," in the hallway between classes, Charlotte turned and looked directly at her. No tears, no shame, just a cool, assessing gaze that seemed to unsettle Madison more than any comeback could have. Charlotte was changing the rules of engagement without asking permission. That's when Miss Rosa entered her life. Rosa Martinez was an elderly seamstress who ran a tiny alteration shop called Rosa's Stitches, 3 blocks from Charlotte's apartment building. Charlotte had walked past it 1,000 times without really seeing it, but one afternoon, desperate to fix a dress that was falling apart at the seams, Charlotte gathered her courage and walked inside. Miss Rosa was small and weathered like driftwood, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but still capable of extraordinary precision with needle and thread. She took one look at Charlotte, really looked, in a way few adults bothered to do, and said in accented English, "You have the eyes of someone who sees the details other people miss. Come here, show me this dress you need fixed." What should have been a simple 10-minute repair turned into a 2-hour conversation. Miss Rosa examined Charlotte's clumsy, self-taught alterations and instead of criticizing the amateur work, asked questions. Why did you choose this seam placement? What effect were you trying to create? When Charlotte shyly mentioned her sketchbooks, Miss Rosa demanded to see them immediately. Charlotte hesitated. These drawings were private, secret, her most vulnerable creations, but something about Miss Rosa's no-nonsense intensity made her pull out her phone and show photos of her recent work. "Misha," Miss Rosa said after studying the images, her voice rough with unexpected emotion, "these are not just drawings. These are solutions to real problems. You're designing for actual bodies, real women. Do you understand how rare that is? How valuable?" Nobody had ever called Charlotte's obsessive sketching valuable before. Nobody had ever suggested that her frustrated attempts to imagine beautiful clothes for her own body might have actual worth beyond personal therapy. "I can teach you," Miss Rosa continued, her dark eyes intense. "Pattern making, proper construction, professional techniques. But you must promise me something. You will never ever design clothes that punish bodies for existing. You will create with love, not shame. Can you promise me this?" Charlotte nodded, unable to speak past the lump blocking her throat. This was the ally she hadn't known to hope for, someone who saw potential instead of problems, who offered skills instead of pity. But Madison wasn't finished with her campaign of cruelty. One Saturday afternoon in early August, as Charlotte sat in her usual spot behind the lifeguard station, sketching a group of tourists from France, Madison and 3 of her friends appeared. They'd clearly been drinking. White claws dangled from their manicured hands, and their laughter had that sharp, reckless edge that signaled trouble brewing. "Still drawing pretty things you'll never wear?" Madison said, swaying slightly as she positioned herself between Charlotte and her ocean view. "It's actually kind of pathetic, Charlotte. Like a homeless person drawing mansions, pure fantasy with zero connection to reality." The old Charlotte would have gathered her things and fled immediately. But the new Charlotte, the one who'd spent 3 months learning proper garment construction from Miss Rosa, who'd begun to understand that her years of obsessive observation had given her knowledge that Madison's expensive wardrobe could never provide. This Charlotte stayed seated and kept sketching. "What do you want, Madison?" Charlotte asked, her voice level and almost bored. The casual dismissal clearly infuriated Madison more than fear or tears would have. She grabbed for Charlotte's sketchbook, but Charlotte held it smoothly out of reach. "You think you're better than us now?" Madison spat, her words slightly slurred. "You think because some old lady lets you hang around her shop that anyone will ever take you seriously? You're fat, Charlotte. Nobody wants to see fat girls in bikinis. Nobody wants to buy clothes designed by someone who can't even dress herself properly. My mother owns the most successful boutique in town, and she says plus-size fashion is a dead-end market. There's no money in it because fat women know they look bad no matter what they wear." Charlotte stood up slowly, and she was 3 inches taller than Madison. She'd never paid attention to that before, had always tried to make herself smaller, less noticeable. But now she used her full height, her full physical presence. "I'm not designing for nobody," Charlotte said quietly, meeting Madison's eyes directly. "I'm designing for the 67% of American women who wear size 14 or above, for the women who actually have bodies instead of just decorative stick figures." The precision of that statistic, a real number she'd learned during her research, visibly shocked Madison. One of her friends giggled nervously, uncomfortably. Madison's face flushed an ugly red, and for a moment Charlotte thought she might actually try to hit her. Instead, Madison did something worse. She smiled with pure venom. "You know what's hilarious?" Madison said, her voice syrupy with false sweetness. "My mother's boutique is launching a swimwear line next season. Real designers from New York. Professional work from people who actually went to design school." She paused for dramatic effect, enjoying her moment. "I suggested we maybe include some plus-size options, be charitable and inclusive. But my mother said there's no market for it here. Fat women don't actually go to the beach in Sunset Beach. They're too ashamed to be seen. Why would we waste money on inventory that won't sell?" The words landed like physical blows, each one finding its target. Madison and her friends walked away laughing, their voices fading into the ambient beach noise. Charlotte sank back down behind the lifeguard station, her temporary confidence crumbling. The shame tried to flood back in, tried to reclaim all the territory she'd been fighting to liberate from its control. She looked down at her latest sketch, a beautiful, structured one-piece designed for a full figure, with pattern details she'd copied from an elegant French tourist's designer sarong. It was good work. She knew it was good work. But Madison's words echoed relentlessly. No market for it. Too ashamed to be seen. That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She lay in the twin bed she'd slept in since childhood, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to her mother's exhausted snoring from the next room and her sister Emma's quiet breathing from the other twin bed 3 feet away. Madison's mother wasn't entirely wrong. Most plus-size swimwear available was poorly constructed, treated as an afterthought by the fashion industry, designed with the clear assumption that fat women wanted to hide and minimize rather than be seen and celebrated. But what if that wasn't actually a reflection of what fat women wanted? What if it was just a reflection of what thin designers assumed fat women wanted? The memory surfaced suddenly, sharp and clear as broken glass. Charlotte had been maybe 8 years old, standing in a Target dressing room with her mother. Her mother had been trying on swimsuits, and Charlotte watched as she picked through the extremely limited options in her size, all of them black or navy, all designed to slim and minimize, all fundamentally apologetic in their construction. "Mama, why don't they have pretty ones in your size?" Charlotte had asked with childhood innocence. Her mother had looked at her with such profound sadness. "Because, baby girl, they think women like me don't deserve to feel beautiful. They think we should be grateful for anything that covers us and hides us from view." Even then, at 8 years old, it had seemed wrong to Charlotte, unjust and unnecessary and cruel. Her mother was beautiful, strong arms from years of physical labor, a warm smile that lit up rooms, graceful movements despite her size. Why should she be forced to wear ugly, poorly made clothes to the beach? Miss Rosa's words came back to Charlotte as she lay awake. "You're designing solutions to real problems." Maybe the solution wasn't just technical, proper construction and good fit. Maybe the solution was also emotional, philosophical, revolutionary. Maybe the solution was creating swimwear that said clearly to women like her mother, women like herself, "You belong at the beach. Your body is not a problem to be solved or hidden. Your body is a form to be celebrated and adorned." It was a radical thought that made her heart race with equal parts fear and excitement. But alongside the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in years, genuine hope. What if she could actually do this? What if all the years she'd spent behind that lifeguard station, all the obsessive observation, all the careful sketches, all the months of technical training with Miss Rosa, what if it all added up to something real and meaningful and commercially viable? The next morning, Charlotte arrived at Rosa's Stitches before the shop even opened, sitting on the doorstep with a proposal sketched out on 5 pages of graph paper. When Miss Rosa arrived and unlocked the door, Charlotte followed her inside and spread the pages across the cutting table. "I want to create a collection," she told her mentor, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 6 swimsuits, each one designed specifically for bodies like mine, like my mother's, like most actual American women. Beautiful fabrics, bold patterns, professional construction, not apologetic, not flattering in the way that actually means hiding and minimizing, just confident and beautiful and unapologetic. She paused, then added quietly, "I want to prove Madison's mother wrong. I want to prove that there is a market, that fat women do want beautiful swimwear, that we deserve better than what the fashion industry has been giving us." Miss Rosa studied the sketches for a long moment, her arthritic fingers tracing the design lines Charlotte had drawn with such care. When she looked up, there were tears tracking down her weathered cheeks. "When I was young," Miss Rosa said softly, "before my hands became like this, before I came to America, I wanted to do exactly this thing. I wanted to create beautiful clothes for women the fashion world ignored, but I was afraid. I let fear make me small and safe." She reached across the table and gripped Charlotte's hand with surprising strength. "We will do this together, Mika. I will teach you everything I know about construction and finishing. And you will create what I did not have the courage to create. You will be brave where I was afraid." They began working with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Charlotte would endure school, the lingering whispers, the continued circulation of that video, Madison's ongoing campaign of small cruelties, then head straight to Rosa's Stitches every afternoon. There, in the back room crowded with fabric bolts and the comforting hum of industrial sewing machines, she would work until her eyes blurred and her back ached. Miss Rosa was a demanding, exacting teacher. She made Charlotte remake seams that were off by a single millimeter. She insisted on perfect pattern matching and professional finishing techniques. "If you're going to challenge the fashion industry's assumptions about who deserves beautiful clothes," Miss Rosa said firmly, "your work must be absolutely flawless. They will look for any excuse to dismiss you as an amateur. Don't give them that excuse." But she also taught with genuine love and encouragement. When Charlotte's frustration would overflow into tears of exhaustion, Miss Rosa would make them both strong Cuban coffee and tell stories of her own youth in Havana, of the designs she dreamed of creating before political upheaval and immigration and economic necessity channeled her into alterations and repairs instead of creation. As Charlotte's technical skills grew exponentially, so did her confidence in areas beyond sewing. She began to notice cracks in Madison's seemingly impenetrable armor. Madison's entire identity was built on her physical beauty and social status. She had constructed her self-worth on the unstable foundation of appearance and peer approval. Any challenge to her supremacy in those domains genuinely threatened her sense of self. Charlotte, by contrast, was building her identity on skills, on knowledge, on the tangible ability to create beautiful things with her own hands. Nobody could take that away with a cruel comment. Nobody could scroll past it or mock it into irrelevance. It was real and solid and hers. She started speaking up more in school, challenging casual cruelty when she witnessed it. When a teacher made an offhand comment about getting that beach body ready for summer, Charlotte raised her hand and asked politely, "Don't all bodies become beach bodies when they go to the beach?" The teacher blinked in confusion and several students laughed. But this time, some of them were laughing with Charlotte, not at her. People were watching her now with different eyes, not just mockingly, but with genuine curiosity. Who was this girl who used to hide and cry, but now walked the hallways with her shoulders back? Who wore clothes that actually fit and flattered instead of hiding her body? Who sat behind that lifeguard station sketching, but now seemed to be studying the tourists with analytical confidence rather than desperate longing? Charlotte was becoming someone new, not thinner, not conventionally prettier, but undeniably more present, more solid, more real. And as she cut her first patent piece from expensive fabric that Miss Rosa had helped her order from a specialty supplier in Los Angeles, a vibrant coral with geometric white patterns, Charlotte felt something she hadn't experienced in years: specific, actionable hope. Not the vague, desperate hoping that life might somehow magically improve, but concrete hope based on skills she was actively developing and goals she was deliberately pursuing. The plan was taking shape, one careful stitch at a time. She would create the collection. She would find models, real women from Sunset Beach with real bodies. She would photograph them at golden hour when the light made everything magical. And then she would find a way to sell them, to prove there was a market, to show Madison's mother and everyone else who dismissed her that they'd been catastrophically wrong. Charlotte was 18 years old when she completed her first swimsuit. It was the coral geometric one-piece, sized precisely for her own body, constructed with professional-grade techniques that would hold up to actual ocean swimming. The moment she pulled it on in the tiny bathroom at the back of Rosa's stitches and saw herself in the full-length mirror, something inside her chest cracked open and light poured in. The suit fit, not in the way cheap clothes pretended to fit, fabric stretching desperately across apologetic bodies trying to disappear. It actually fit. The bust was properly supported with interior structure, the waist was shaped but comfortable, the leg openings sat exactly where they should without cutting or binding. The bold pattern drew the eye with intentional confidence, creating visual interest that had nothing to do with minimizing or camouflaging anything. She looked like those elegant European tourists she'd been sketching for years. No, she corrected herself, studying her reflection with new eyes. She looked like herself, finally dressed for the life she'd been observing from the margins. "Miss Rosa," Charlotte called out, her voice unsteady with emotion she couldn't quite name. When her mentor appeared in the bathroom doorway, the elderly woman pressed both weathered hands to her mouth. "Oh, Misha," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "You are magnificent. This is what I dreamed of creating and never had the courage to make real." Charlotte felt tears threatening, but pushed them back through sheer force of will. "I want to wear this to the beach tomorrow morning." Not hiding behind the lifeguard station like always, actually in the water, swimming. It was a bigger declaration than it might have seemed to anyone else. She hadn't been swimming in the Pacific Ocean since that terrible day when Madison had humiliated her in front of everyone. The beach had become a place for observation only, not participation. But if she was going to truly believe in what she was creating, she had to embody it herself first. "Then you will," Miss Rosa said firmly, her voice allowing no argument. "And I will come with you. I'll bring my camera to document this moment. This is history, Misha, your history." The next morning was a Sunday in late September, and the beach was crowded with both locals enjoying their weekend and the last tourists of summer season. Charlotte arrived at dawn, before most people, wearing her new creation with a simple white linen shirt over it and a sarong she'd sewn herself from complementary fabric. She chose her territory, the area behind the lifeguard station that had been her sanctuary for years, as the place to set down her bag. Miss Rosa had already arrived despite the early hour, an old digital camera in her arthritic hands, looking nervous but fiercely determined. "Are you ready for this, Misha?" the older woman asked. Charlotte looked out at the Pacific, at the waves catching the golden early light, at the vast ocean that had been part of her entire life, but that she'd stopped participating in years ago. She thought about every single time she'd sat behind this lifeguard station and watched other people live their lives while she merely observed and documented from the shadows. She thought about Madison's cruel voice, "Nobody wants to see fat girls in bikinis." And she thought with fierce determination, "Watch me prove you wrong." She removed her shirt and sarong, standing in her one piece as early morning joggers passed by on the beach path. A few people glanced at her, some with surprise, some with the automatic critical assessment she'd learned to expect from strangers evaluating her body. But Charlotte didn't drop her eyes to the sand like she'd done her entire life. She held her head up and walked to the water's edge with deliberate confidence. The waves were gentle that morning, and the water was warmer than she'd remembered from childhood. She waded in slowly, feeling the ocean embrace her body without judgment, without commentary, without shame. The swimsuit performed exactly as she'd designed it to. Supportive but not restrictive, beautiful but completely functional. She dove under a small wave and came up laughing, salt water streaming down her face, tasting the Pacific on her lips. For the first time in years, she felt like she truly belonged here, in this place where she'd been born, in this ocean that she'd loved from a careful distance for so long. Miss Rosa was clicking away with the camera, capturing images that Charlotte would see later. A fat girl in a stunning swimsuit, playing in the waves with pure, unfiltered joy on her face. Not performing for anyone, not posing, just existing without apology. It was simultaneously revolutionary and ordinary. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice came from behind her on the beach, speaking English with a distinct French accent. Charlotte turned to see a woman standing near her things, tall, slim, probably in her early 40s, with that particular elegant style Charlotte associated with European women. The stranger was holding one of Charlotte's sketches that had slipped from her bag, studying it with intense focus and professional interest. Charlotte waded quickly back to shore, suddenly protective of her private work. "That's mine," she said, reaching for the paper with water still dripping from her hair. But the woman held onto it gently, still examining the design with careful attention. "Did you draw this?" she asked, her French accent making the words sound somehow more serious. Charlotte nodded warily. "And these other sketches in your bag? Are you an artist of some kind?" "I'm a designer," Charlotte said, and it was the first time she'd used that word to describe herself out loud to a stranger. It felt both presumptuous and absolutely right. The woman's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "May I see more of your work, please?" There was something in her tone, serious professional assessment rather than casual curiosity, that made Charlotte hesitate only briefly before pulling out the portfolio she'd carefully assembled. Over the past months, she documented 30 complete designs, each one fully rendered with fabric notes, construction details, and her observations about body types and functional needs. The woman sat down on the sand without asking permission and began going through every single page with systematic attention. Charlotte stood there dripping ocean water, heart pounding against her ribs, while this elegant stranger examined years of her most private creative work. Miss Rosa approached slowly from where she'd been photographing, protective instinct clearly activated. "I am Sophie Laurent," the woman finally said, looking up at Charlotte with an expression that was hard to read. "I work in fashion photography in Paris. Well, I did work in Paris. Now I'm taking 1 year to travel across America and decide what comes next in my career and life." She tapped Charlotte's portfolio with one manicured finger. "This work is extraordinary. You're designing for real women's bodies with an understanding of garment construction that most fashion design students don't develop until their 3rd or 4th year of formal education. Where did you study design?" Charlotte laughed, a short, slightly bitter sound. "I didn't study anywhere. I've never been to fashion school. I taught myself from magazines and YouTube and whatever I could find online, and Miss Rosa taught me proper construction techniques." She gestured toward her mentor. Sophie looked between them with visible surprise, then back at the sketches spread across her lap. "You're entirely self-taught, and you created all of this work?" She paused, studying Charlotte's face carefully. "How old are you exactly?" 18. Charlotte admitted, waiting for the inevitable dismissal that must surely come. "You're too young, too inexperienced, too self-taught, too fat to be taken seriously in fashion." Instead, Sophie's face broke into a wide, genuine smile. 18 years old. Mon Dieu. When I was 18, I was still trying to figure out how to use my first professional camera properly. She stood up, brushing sand from her expensive linen pants with casual elegance. Charlotte, I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you can handle directness. I have been working in fashion photography for 23 years. I know genuine talent when I see it. More importantly, I know commercial viability when I see it. There is a massive, completely underserved market for exactly what you're designing here. These aren't just beautiful pieces. They're solutions to real problems that real women face every single day. The American plus-size market alone is worth over $24 billion annually, and it's growing. She paused, letting that enormous number sink in. Have you considered going into actual production, creating a real brand and business? The question was so absurd that Charlotte could only stare at her in disbelief. Production, brand, business. She was a fat teenager who sewed in the back room of an alterations shop with fabric bought using money saved from her mother's housekeeping wages and her own part-time job at a coffee shop. Sophie seemed to read her thoughts with practiced ease. I know how that sounds, especially coming from a stranger you met on the beach. But please listen to my proposal. What if I could help make this real? I have extensive contacts in the fashion industry. I know manufacturers who specialize in small production runs for emerging designers. I have personal savings that I was planning to use to open another photography studio in Paris, but honestly, I'm tired of just documenting other people's creative visions. She looked directly at Charlotte with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. What if we partnered together? You design the collections. I handle all the business operations, production coordination, marketing, and brand development. We split everything 50-50 as equal partners. We create something actually meaningful instead of just profitable. We prove that fashion can serve real women instead of just selling them inadequate solutions. Charlotte looked desperately at Miss Rosa, who had tears streaming down her face, making no attempt to hide her emotion. Mija, Miss Rosa said softly in Spanish, then switched to English. Do you remember what I told you when we first started working together? That I never had the courage to do what needed doing? She reached out and gripped Charlotte's wet arm with her gnarled hand. You have that courage, that fire I never had. This woman is offering you an opportunity to actually change things for women like us, to prove that what we've been creating in secret actually matters in the real world. Charlotte's mind was racing through possibilities and impossibilities simultaneously. This was absurd. This didn't happen to girls like her. Girls like her didn't get discovered by French fashion professionals on the beach. Girls like her worked retail jobs and went to community college, and maybe if they were lucky, got office jobs that paid enough to move out of their mother's apartment eventually. They didn't become fashion designers. They didn't build brands. They didn't matter in that world. But Sophie was still standing there patiently, waiting for an answer with professional composure. And Charlotte thought about her mother scrubbing toilets at the beachfront resort where wealthy tourists stayed. She thought about every fat woman she'd ever seen settling for ugly, poorly made swimsuits because the fashion industry offered nothing better. She thought about Madison's mother confidently declaring there was no market for plus-size swimwear in Sunset Beach. She thought about all the girls like her, hiding behind lifeguard stations instead of playing in the waves of the beach where they were born. Yes, Charlotte said, just that single word, yes. Sophie's face transformed with her brilliant smile. Perfect. Then we have considerable work to do, and not much time to waste. I'm staying in Sunset Beach for 5 more weeks before I need to be in New York. I suggest we spend that time building a comprehensive business plan, refining your 6 strongest designs for the initial collection launch, and shooting your first professional lookbook. She gestured at the Pacific Ocean behind Charlotte, the morning sun making the water sparkle like scattered diamonds. We'll shoot right here on this beach, with real women from this community. We'll show the fashion world exactly what you've been creating in secret all these years. She extended her hand in a formal business gesture. Partners? Charlotte shook it, feeling like she was signing some kind of contract with destiny itself, committing to a future she'd never quite believed was possible. Partners, she echoed, and the word felt like a promise and a revolution combined. The news spread through Sunset Beach like wildfire racing through dry California hills. Charlotte Reed, Charlotte the Whale, the fat girl everyone had mocked, was going into business with a French fashion professional from Paris. The disbelief was almost tangible. Some people were genuinely supportive, especially women who'd known Charlotte's mother for years and had watched Charlotte grow up enduring relentless ridicule. They understood what this opportunity meant. But others, particularly in Madison's social circle and among the town's more established residents, treated it like an elaborate cosmic joke. "She thinks she's a designer now?" Charlotte overheard Madison's friend Ashley saying in the bathroom at their favorite coffee shop. "That French woman must be running some kind of scam or charity project. Why would anyone actually buy swimsuits designed by a fat girl who doesn't even look good in them herself? It makes no sense." The words stung like jellyfish, but less than they would have before Sophie appeared in her life, because now Charlotte had something these girls didn't have: a real partnership with someone who genuinely believed in the commercial viability of her work. Sophie was demanding but absolutely brilliant in ways Charlotte was only beginning to understand. She pushed Charlotte to refine her designs, to think not just aesthetically but commercially and practically. "This ruching detail here is beautiful, but will be too expensive to produce in volume manufacturing. Can you achieve the same visual effect with fewer, simpler seams? This fabric is gorgeous, but won't hold up to repeated exposure to chlorine in pools. What's a comparable alternative that's more durable?" She taught Charlotte to think like a business owner and brand manager, not just an artist creating in isolation. And she insisted on including Miss Rosa in everything, recognizing the older woman's crucial role. "Your mentor deserves to see this through to completion," Sophie said firmly, when Charlotte suggested Miss Rosa might want to step back from the intensity. "She helped build this foundation. She should be present and involved for the structure that rises from it." Together, the three women created a detailed plan. They would launch with 6 distinct designs in sizes ranging from US size 12 to US size 24. They would price the pieces competitively, but not cheaply. These were premium garments, and the pricing needed to reflect their quality and the skill involved in creating them. For models, Charlotte insisted on choosing women from Sunset Beach rather than professional models from Los Angeles. Her mother was one, of course. A proud, beautiful woman in her late 40s who cried when she put on the navy blue, skirted one-piece Charlotte had designed specifically for her body and coloring. They recruited a young woman named Jessica, who worked at the local market, a middle school teacher named Mrs. Patterson, the receptionist from the beachfront hotel where Charlotte's mother worked, 2 of Miss Rosa's regular alterations clients, and Charlotte herself. 6 women with real bodies, curves, stretch marks, cellulite, soft bellies, thick thighs, all the physical characteristics that fashion typically airbrushed away or ignored entirely, wearing swimsuits designed with love and technical skill instead of shame and apology. The photo shoot happened at golden hour on Charlotte's Beach, with Sophie directing with professional precision and a local photographer she'd hired shooting on professional equipment. The atmosphere was joyful and defiant, and completely unlike any swimwear campaign Charlotte had ever seen in magazines or online. Madison found out about the photo shoot, of course. Information traveled fast in a small beach town. She showed up midway through the session with her mother in tow, Mrs. Taylor, who owned Sunset Beach's most exclusive boutique, and who had apparently heard rumors about potential competition. "What exactly is this?" Mrs. Taylor demanded, her voice sharp with poorly disguised disgust. She looked at the models in their swimsuits, at Charlotte confidently directing small adjustments to styling, at Sophie supervising everything with calm professional authority, at Miss Rosa fussing over final details with obvious pride. The scene clearly offended her sense of how fashion was supposed to work. "This is a professional photo shoot for my new swimwear line," Charlotte said calmly, not pausing in her work of adjusting the strap on her mother's swimsuit. "We're launching the collection next month online and potentially in select retail locations. Perhaps you've heard about it." The casual confidence in her voice, the way she didn't stop working to address them, clearly infuriated both Madison and her mother. "A swimwear line!" Mrs. Taylor laughed, a harsh sound with sharp edges. "Designed by whom exactly? You, Charlotte, honey? There's a reason professional designers spend years studying at places like FIT and Parsons. You can't just decide one day to be in the fashion industry without proper training or connections." "Actually," Sophie interjected smoothly, walking over to join the confrontation with elegant purpose, "in fashion, as in most creative industries, talent and vision matter considerably more than formal credentials or family connections." She extended her hand with European formality. "Sophie Laurent, I'm Charlotte's business partner, and you are..." Mrs. Taylor took the offered hand limply, clearly thrown off balance by Sophie's polished authority and French accent. "I own Taylor's boutique in town," she said, recovering slightly and pulling out her business card like a weapon. "I've been in the fashion retail business for 25 years. I know this market intimately, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that this..." She gestured dismissively at the models wearing Charlotte's designs. "This has no commercial viability whatsoever. Plus-size swimwear is a niche market at best, especially in a beach community like this. You're wasting your time and money on a product nobody wants." Sophie's smile could have cut glass with its sharp edges. "Well, I genuinely appreciate your concern for our business venture. However, the global plus-size swimwear market is currently valued at approximately $2 billion and growing at roughly 18% annually. The American market specifically represents about $1 billion of that total, so I'm quite comfortable with our commercial assessment and market research." She paused, letting those enormous numbers sink in. Perhaps the issue isn't that the market doesn't exist. Perhaps the issue is that established retailers haven't been adequately serving it. The silence that followed was absolutely delicious to Charlotte. Mrs. Taylor's face had gone pale, then flushed an ugly red color. You can't just come here and..." "We're not just coming here," Charlotte interrupted quietly but firmly, finding her voice and her power. "I've always been here. I was born in Sunset Beach. I've lived here my entire life. You've just never noticed me because I wasn't performing femininity in the way you approved of, in the body type you valued." She gestured to the models, these women from her community wearing her designs. "But we've always been here. Fat women who love the beach and the ocean, who deserve beautiful swimwear, who refuse to be invisible anymore just because the fashion industry has ignored us for decades. You've been ignoring a massive market that was right in front of you this entire time. That's not my problem to solve for you." It was the most powerful Charlotte had ever felt in her entire 18 years, standing on her beach, surrounded by women she'd dressed in garments she'd designed with her own hands, telling the woman whose daughter had tormented her for years that she'd been thinking too small, seeing too narrowly, understanding too little. Madison herself had been uncharacteristically quiet this whole time, but now she stepped forward with visible anger. "You think this makes you special?" she said, and her voice cracked slightly with some emotion Charlotte couldn't quite identify. "You think one French woman showing interest in your little amateur project means you've somehow won, that you've beaten me?" There was something desperate and almost frightened in her tone that Charlotte had never heard before. "I'm not trying to win anything against you, Madison," Charlotte said honestly, and she meant it. "This was never about you, actually. It was always about creating something that needed to exist in the world, about serving women who've been underserved by an industry that decided they didn't matter." She paused, then added more softly, "I'm genuinely sorry you can't see that this isn't a competition between us. It's just me finally creating the life I want, instead of accepting the limitations other people tried to impose on me." It wasn't entirely true. Part of Charlotte definitely enjoyed this moment of reversal, this chance to show Madison that cruelty didn't win in the end. But mostly, she meant what she said. Madison's desperate need to diminish others to feel tall herself now seemed more sad than threatening. "Come on," Mrs. Taylor said sharply, grabbing her daughter's arm with visible force. "We're leaving. This entire thing is absurd and unprofessional." They stalked away across the sand toward the parking lot, but not before Madison looked back once. The expression on her face was complex, anger mixed with confusion, mixed with something that might have been fear. Fear that maybe Charlotte had been right all along, that maybe bodies like Charlotte's weren't the problem, that maybe the real problem had always been the suffocating narrowness of imagination that insisted on one rigid definition of beauty, of belonging, of worth. Sophie watched them disappear from the beach, then turned back to the photo shoot with professional focus. "Well," she said mildly, a small smile playing at her lips, "that was certainly illuminating about the local market dynamics. Shall we continue with our work?" They shot until the sun set in spectacular California fashion, capturing image after image of joy, confidence, and bodies that the mainstream fashion industry usually rendered invisible or treated as problems to solve. Charlotte's mother emerged from the Pacific in her navy-skirted suit, water streaming down her body, laughing with pure happiness. And Charlotte captured that moment in her memory forever. Her mother, who had spent 23 years cleaning up after rich people's messes, standing tall and absolutely beautiful in a swimsuit her daughter had designed specifically for her. "Baby girl," her mother said, pulling Charlotte into a hug that smelled like salt water and hope and the ocean that had always been part of their lives. "You actually did this. You made this real." And Charlotte hugged her back fiercely, feeling the solid reality of what she was building, not just clothes, not just a business, but tangible proof that the world could be different than it was. That girls like her could create the beauty and belonging they'd been denied access to. That margins were just places nobody had thought to look yet, full of untapped possibility and underserved markets worth billions of dollars. The first production batch of 150 swimsuits sold out in 9 days. Sophie had built a clean, professional website featuring the photos from their beach shoot, with Charlotte's story prominently included. The self-taught 18-year-old designer from California creating swimwear for bodies the fashion industry systematically ignored. The response was overwhelming in its intensity and emotional weight. Orders came from across California, obviously, but also from Texas, New York, Florida, even international orders from Canada and the UK. Plus-size women from around the country and beyond who were desperately hungry for swimwear that was both genuinely beautiful and actually functional. The Instagram account Sophie created gained 12,000 followers in the first 3 weeks. Women posted photos of themselves wearing Charlotte's designs with captions like, "First time I felt confident at the pool in 15 years," and finally, "Swimwear designed by us, for us," and "I cried when I put this on because I actually felt beautiful." Charlotte read every single comment, every testimonial, tears streaming down her face as she realized her designs were changing real women's relationships with their own bodies. The money from that first collection changed Charlotte's life in immediate, tangible ways that still felt surreal. She could pay her mother back for all the fabric expenses and still have enough left over to rent actual commercial studio space, a small retail location on a side street in downtown Sunset Beach where she could work, meet with potential clients, and eventually sell directly to local customers. Miss Rosa's alterations shop became their production facility, with Sophie helping hire 3 additional experienced seamstresses to keep up with rapidly growing demand. Charlotte graduated from Sunset Beach High that spring, barely, because she'd spent most of her senior year building a business instead of studying for AP exams. But she graduated. At the ceremony, when they called her name, the applause was noticeably louder and longer than for almost anyone else. Some of it was surely pity or surprise, but some of it, Charlotte knew with quiet certainty, was genuine respect and recognition. She'd done something real and visible, something that made her community reconsider everything they thought they knew about the fat girl who used to hide behind the lifeguard station. Charlotte invested in herself and her skills with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Sophie connected her with online courses in advanced pattern making, fashion business management, and digital marketing strategies. Charlotte studied with the same laser focus she'd once applied to sketching tourists, absorbing information like she was making up for lost years and lost opportunities, which, in a very real way, she was, making up for time spent believing she was too fat to deserve dreams, too ugly to deserve respect, too worthless as a person to deserve investment and development. Every new skill she mastered felt like reclaiming territory that had been stolen from her by years of systematic cruelty. And her design vision expanded beyond swimwear into coordinating resort wear, cover-ups, beach dresses, casual linen pieces, all designed with the same core philosophy: beautiful, well-constructed garments for real bodies, no apologies or shame required. Her second collection launched in early summer and sold even faster than the first. Her personal transformation was visible, but not in the way people typically expected or hoped for when they talked about transformation. Charlotte didn't lose weight. That had never been the point of any of this, and she refused to let anyone make it the point. But her presence and the way she occupied space changed dramatically. She started wearing the bold, confident designs she created, walking through Sunset Beach in vibrant prints and flattering cuts that announced her existence rather than apologizing for it. She cut her long brown hair into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her face with intentional style. She learned to do makeup that enhanced her features rather than attempting to conceal them. Most importantly, she learned to take up physical and social space without constantly shrinking herself, to accommodate others' comfort, to speak in business meetings without making her voice small and deferential, to negotiate prices and terms without automatically undercutting her own worth, to exist in rooms and spaces without performing constant gratitude for being allowed entry. The girl who used to cry behind the lifeguard station became a young woman who commanded attention and respect, not through conventional beauty, but through undeniable presence and proven competence. Mrs. Taylor's boutique, in a twist of irony that Charlotte found deeply satisfying, became her first traditional retail partner in Sunset Beach. Not because Mrs. Taylor had experienced any kind of genuine change of heart, she definitely hadn't, but because she was a shrewd businesswoman who recognized that Charlotte's designs were selling successfully and her store needed that inventory to remain competitive. Sophie negotiated the partnership terms with ruthless professionalism that Charlotte found impressive. Charlotte's designs would have their own dedicated section within the boutique, with clear branding and mutually agreed upon pricing that protected Charlotte's margins. "I want you to understand that I don't like this arrangement," Mrs. Taylor admitted bluntly during the contract signing at Sophie's temporary office space. "But I would be a complete fool to ignore this market segment now that you've successfully proven it exists and is profitable. This is purely a business decision." Charlotte smiled with newfound confidence. "I appreciate your business pragmatism, Mrs. Taylor, even if I don't appreciate your previous blindness to obvious market opportunities that were right in front of you." It was the kind of politely sharp insult she was learning to deliver, the professional language of success. But rapid success created new and unexpected challenges that Charlotte hadn't anticipated. The demand for her designs quickly exceeded what Miss Rosa's small operation could possibly produce, even with additional seamstresses. Sophie spent weeks on the phone with manufacturers' representatives from Los Angeles and even flew several of them down to Sunset Beach for in-person meetings. They eventually moved production to a larger facility in LA while maintaining strict quality control standards that Charlotte insisted upon absolutely. Every single seam had to be perfect. Every suit had to fit precisely the way she'd designed it to fit. Your brand is built entirely on the promise that plus-size women deserve the same quality and attention to detail as straight-size fashion, Sophie reminded her during one particularly frustrating production delay. You cannot compromise that fundamental promise just to scale faster and make more money in the short term. That would destroy everything we're building. It meant their growth was slower than it could have been with looser standards. But Charlotte was completely fine with that decision. She'd spent 18 years being rushed past, systematically dismissed, thoroughly ignored. She would not rush past or provide inferior products to the women who desperately needed what she was creating. Her voice and influence grew beyond just business operations. Charlotte started a blog, first writing primarily about design techniques and inspiration, then gradually about body image and fat acceptance, then finally about her specific experiences growing up fat in a beach town where bodies were constantly judged. Her writing was raw and unflinchingly honest, capturing both the deep pain of her past and the complicated, nuanced reality of her present success. I still have days where I look in the mirror and hear Madison's voice calling me Charlotte the Whale, she wrote in one particularly vulnerable post that went unexpectedly viral. Success doesn't magically erase trauma. Money doesn't automatically heal shame. But creating something genuinely meaningful, serving women who desperately need what you're offering, building something larger than yourself that provides a sense of purpose, that slowly, gradually, painfully rewrites the story you believed about your own fundamental worthlessness. The post was shared 63,000 times across social media platforms. Women commented with their own painful stories, their own childhood nicknames that had scarred them, their own difficult journeys from shame towards something approaching self-acceptance and maybe even self-love. A significant moment of doubt and fear came when Teen Vogue reached out requesting a profile feature for their emerging designers spotlight. Charlotte was simultaneously excited, terrified, and absolutely convinced it must be some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. The interview was scheduled in Los Angeles, requiring Charlotte to travel away from Sunset Beach for the first time in her entire life. On the flight from San Diego to LAX, her first time ever on an airplane, she had a full-blown panic attack. What was she actually doing? She wasn't a real designer with formal training. She didn't have the right educational background or industry connections. She didn't look like someone who should be in fashion. The imposter syndrome that had been waiting patiently on the margins of her growing success came flooding back with crushing force. Sophie, traveling with her and sitting in the seat beside her, talked her down with calm professionalism. Every single successful person feels exactly like this at some point, she said firmly, gripping Charlotte's hand as the plane climbed. The only difference is whether you let the fear stop you completely or whether you act despite the fear being present. You've already proven you can do the latter. The Teen Vogue interview was intense and challenging in ways Charlotte hadn't fully prepared for. The journalist, a thin, polished woman named Miranda, asked difficult, probing questions that felt designed to unsettle. Some fashion critics have said your designs only work in carefully styled photos, that plus-size women can't actually pull off these bold prints and high-cut legs in real life. How do you respond to that criticism? Charlotte met her eyes directly and answered without hesitation. Those critics are applying standards of what's flattering that were specifically designed to make fat women apologize for existing and taking up space. My designs completely reject that apologetic framework. They're not about making women look thinner than they are. They're about making women look confident, beautiful, and joyful in exactly the bodies they have right now, today, without waiting to lose weight or meet someone else's standards first. Miranda wrote that down verbatim, and Charlotte felt the power in refusing to soften or qualify her stance for mainstream comfort. The article ran 2 months later with a striking photo of Charlotte on Sunset Beach wearing one of her own designs, a bold red one-piece with white geometric detailing, looking directly at the camera with an expression that dared absolutely anyone to question her right to be there, to exist, to succeed. The article changed everything again, but bigger this time. Suddenly, Charlotte wasn't just a heartwarming local success story. She was being positioned by the fashion media as part of a larger, growing movement toward genuine body inclusivity and size diversity. International press picked up the story. Major fashion blogs featured her work. Her website crashed multiple times from overwhelming traffic. Orders poured in from countries she'd barely heard of: Australia, Germany, Brazil, Japan. And with significantly increased visibility came proportionally increased criticism and cruelty. Online comments on articles about her ranged from genuinely supportive to viciously, creatively cruel. She's promoting obesity and unhealthy lifestyles. This is disgusting. Nobody wants to see this. She should focus on losing weight instead of making clothes for fat people. The fat phobia she'd experienced personally her entire life was now public, amplified, and relentless. It hurt deeply. She'd be lying if she said it didn't. But Charlotte was surprised to discover that it hurt less than she'd expected or feared. Because for every hateful comment from someone hiding behind anonymous accounts, there were 10 or 20 from real women with real names saying, "Thank you for creating this. Thank you for seeing us as worthy. Thank you for refusing to make us invisible anymore." During this intense period of rapid growth, something completely unexpected happened with Madison. They ran into each other by pure chance at the local Starbucks, the first direct, unplanned interaction since that confrontation at the beach photo shoot months earlier. Madison looked noticeably different. Thinner in a way that seemed unhealthy rather than aspirational, more tense and uncertain, less confident in her movements. "Charlotte," she said awkwardly, clutching her iced coffee like a shield. "I saw the Teen Vogue article online. Congratulations on everything, really." Charlotte studied her former tormentor carefully, trying to access anger or satisfaction or vindication, but finding mostly a tired, complicated sympathy. "Thank you," she said neutrally, non-committally. Madison hesitated, clearly working up courage. Then words tumbled out in a rush. "I've been in therapy for like 6 months now, talking about everything, the way I treated you and other people, my eating issues, my mother's impossible expectations, all of it." She looked down at her coffee cup. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I know that doesn't fix anything I did to you or take back any of the pain I caused. But I needed to say it out loud to your face. I'm genuinely sorry." Charlotte sat back in her chair, genuinely surprised. This wasn't the apology she'd sometimes imagined in her private revenge fantasies. Dramatic, public, with dozens of witnesses seeing Madison humiliate herself. This was small and private and perhaps actually sincere. "I appreciate you saying that," Charlotte said carefully, weighing her words. "I'm genuinely glad you're working on yourself in therapy." She paused, considering how honest to be. "But you should know, the worst thing about what you did to me wasn't just the mockery and the cruel nicknames. It was making me believe deep down that I deserved it, that my body was something to be ashamed of and hidden, that I didn't belong at my own beach, in my own school, in my own life. That took years to unlearn, and honestly, I'm still unlearning it every single day." Madison's eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to hide. "I know. God, Charlotte, I know. I'm so sorry for all of it." They didn't become friends. There was far too much painful history for that kind of reconciliation. But they reached something that resembled understanding, or at least peaceful coexistence. Charlotte left that unexpected coffee shop encounter feeling like she'd finally closed a door on a room she'd been trying to escape for years. Madison's apology didn't heal Charlotte's wounds magically, but it confirmed something crucial. The problem had never, ever been Charlotte's body. It had always been other people's cruelty, their projection of their own issues, their devastating smallness of imagination and spirit. Charlotte's mother quit her housekeeping job at the beachfront resort that fall. After 24 years of cleaning tourists' messes and scrubbing other people's toilets, she walked away to become Charlotte's studio manager and operations coordinator, handling inventory management and customer service with the same meticulous attention to detail she'd once applied to making hotel rooms perfect. On her last day at the resort, Charlotte met her in the employee parking lot. "Baby girl," her mother said, tears streaming freely down her face, "you freed me. You freed both of us from limitations we'd accepted as permanent." They stood there holding each other in the parking lot. Two fat women whose bodies the world had insisted were wrong and worthless, but who had together built something beautiful and profitable and genuinely meaningful anyway. That evening, Charlotte designed a special limited edition piece specifically for her mother. A deep purple one-piece with elegant gold detailing, sophisticated and queenly. She called it Maternal Strength. It became one of their best-selling designs, with customers writing to say they'd bought it to honor their own mothers. By the time Charlotte turned 19, her brand was employing 23 people, had established retail partnerships in 11 countries, and she was being invited to speak at fashion and business conferences about size inclusivity and design and the untapped plus-size market. She was making more money in a single month than her mother had made in an entire year at the resort, but the success she was most genuinely proud of was smaller, more personal, less financially quantifiable. She'd started a mentorship program for young plus-size girls in Sunset Beach, teaching them pattern making, basic design principles, and garment construction in the same back room of Rosa's Stitches, where she'd learned her own foundational skills. "You don't have to wait for someone's permission to create," she told these girls, aged 13 to 18, all fat, all told repeatedly they were simultaneously too much and not enough. "You don't have to be thin or conventionally pretty or wealthy to have vision and talent and something valuable to offer. Your body is not your limitation. Their failure of imagination is their limitation, not yours." She watched these girls, who arrived shy and apologetic, taking up as little space as possible, gradually begin to believe they could create instead of just consume, begin to believe they mattered, begin to believe their ideas and their bodies were both worthy of investment and celebration. Charlotte became the person she desperately needed when she was 12 and 13 and 14 and drowning in shame behind the lifeguard station. And in that purposeful choice, she found the kind of meaning that made all the previous pain almost, not quite but almost, make sense as a necessary part of her journey. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, delivered via email with such formal language that Charlotte had to read it 3 times to believe it was real. New York Fashion Week wanted her. Specifically, they were creating a dedicated showcase for emerging American designers focused on size-inclusive fashion as part of their ongoing diversity initiatives, and they wanted Charlotte Reed of Sunset Beach, California, to headline the entire presentation. Full runway show with professional models, international press coverage, major retail buyers in attendance, industry power players, and influential fashion journalists. Everything a designer could want. Sophie called 30 seconds after Charlotte finished reading the email, her voice pitched high with barely contained excitement. "Did you see it? Did you get the invitation?" "Charlotte, this is New York Fashion Week. This is one of the most important, most visible fashion events in the entire world. Major designers, international press, industry power players who can transform careers with a single positive review." "I don't have enough designs ready," Charlotte said immediately, panic rising like floodwater in her chest. "The spring collection isn't finished. I'd need at least 15 new pieces for a full runway show, and I'd need to find models, and I'd need to coordinate everything and—" "Charlotte," Sophie interrupted gently but firmly, "breathe slowly. We have 5 months until February. We can absolutely do this. You've been preparing for exactly this moment your entire life. You just didn't know you were preparing." She was right, of course. Every sketch Charlotte had drawn over the years, every tourist she'd observed with careful attention, every pattern she'd practiced in Miss Rosa's back room, every technical skill she'd mastered, it had all been unconscious preparation for exactly this moment. But knowing that intellectually didn't make the fear any less overwhelming or paralyzing. She'd be on a stage at New York Fashion Week with professionally trained designers from prestigious schools, being judged by people whose entire careers were built on understanding fashion at the highest levels. What if they saw through her immediately? What if they decided her success was just a fluke, her designs amateurish, her vision limited and provincial? Miss Rosa found her that evening sitting behind the old lifeguard station, watching the sunset, sketchbook unopened in her lap, just staring at the Pacific. "Running away from opportunity, Mija?" her mentor asked, settling down beside her in the sand with a grunt of effort. Charlotte smiled despite her anxiety, seriously considering it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the eternal rhythm of the waves. Finally, Miss Rosa spoke with the blunt wisdom Charlotte had come to rely on. "When you first came into my shop 3 years ago, you were so convinced of your own worthlessness that you literally apologized for taking up space just by existing. Now you're being invited to one of the most important, most prestigious fashion events in the entire world, and you're afraid you don't belong there." She turned to look at Charlotte directly. "Mija, you belong anywhere you decide you belong. Fashion Week isn't giving you permission to exist. You're giving them the opportunity to finally recognize what you've already built through your own talent and determination." Charlotte spent the next 5 months in a state of creative overdrive that she'd never experienced before. She designed 15 new pieces for the runway show, each one deliberately representing a different aspect of her journey from shame to triumph. There was First Wave, a swimsuit in the exact coral geometric pattern of that first piece she'd made for herself 3 years ago. Hidden Tears, a striking black one-piece with silver detailing that represented her years of hiding behind the lifeguard station. Golden Victory, a bold, joyful two-piece in yellow and white that celebrated fat bodies in joyful motion. Maternal Strength for her mother, Desert Bloom inspired by California landscapes. Each piece told a specific story. Each piece was designed for real women with real curves and real lives. And each piece was technically flawless, constructed with the precision and professional finishing that Miss Rosa had demanded from day one. She would accept nothing less than perfection because she knew critics would be looking for any excuse to dismiss her work as amateurish or inferior. Finding models was unexpectedly the easiest part of preparation. Charlotte didn't want professional runway models from agencies. She wanted the real women who'd made her brand successful through their loyalty and support. Her mother would walk, of course, wearing the Maternal Strength piece with pride. Sophie's older sister Margot flew in from Paris specifically for this, a curvy woman in her 50s who'd struggled with body image her entire adult life. Charlotte recruited women from her community in Sunset Beach, from her loyal online customer base, from her mentorship program for young plus-size girls. The oldest model was 67 years old, the youngest was 17. Sizes ranged from US 12 to US 28, representing the full spectrum of plus-size bodies. Some were naturally confident, others were terrified of being so publicly visible, but all of them shared a common thread. They were fat women who'd been told their entire lives they didn't belong on runways or in fashion, and they were about to prove that cruel assumption catastrophically, beautifully wrong. The rehearsals in Sunset Beach were chaotic and joyful and transformative in ways Charlotte hadn't anticipated. These weren't professional models who instinctively knew how to walk in formation or pose on command. They were real women learning to own space, to move with confidence, to be seen without apologizing for their existence. Charlotte worked with each woman individually, helping them find their own unique power and presence. "You're not performing beauty for an audience," she told them repeatedly during practice sessions. "You're embodying it for yourself. There's a crucial difference. Performance is for others and their approval. Embodiment is for yourself and your own sense of worth. She watched as women who'd spent literal decades making themselves small and invisible learned to expand, to take up room deliberately, to walk like they had every right to be seen and celebrated. It was transformation made visible in real time, and it was absolutely stunning to witness. By the time they boarded the plane to New York in early February, her models were ready. Not perfect, but genuine and powerful in their authenticity. Mrs. Taylor showed up at Charlotte's studio 2 weeks before Fashion Week, appearing unannounced and looking distinctly uncomfortable in the creative space filled with fabric bolts and dress forms. "I'd like to sponsor your Fashion Week show," she said without preamble or small talk, clearly wanting to get this over with quickly. Charlotte blinked in surprise. "Why would you want to do that?" Mrs. Taylor sighed deeply, a sound that seemed to carry years of accumulated regret. "Because I was completely wrong. About you, about the market opportunity, about everything I assumed. My boutique's plus-size section, your design specifically, now accounts for 42% of our total revenue. I've been in retail for 28 years, and I completely missed what was right in front of me because I was blinded by my own prejudices and narrow assumptions." She paused, clearly forcing herself to continue. "I can't undo what my daughter did to you, what I said to you and about you, but I can support what you're building now. Consider it both a business investment and a personal apology." Charlotte considered the offer carefully, taking her time. It would be satisfyingly easy to refuse, to hold on to completely justified anger. But she thought about how real success was actually built, often with support from imperfect people making imperfect amends, trying to do better even if they couldn't undo the past. $30,000, Charlotte said firmly, naming a specific figure. "That's what full platinum sponsorship costs for the show. Your boutique's name in the program, acknowledgement in all press materials, and VIP seating. But I maintain complete creative control over every aspect of the show, non-negotiable." Mrs. Taylor nodded without hesitation. "Done. I'll have my accountant wire the money today." She paused at the door. "And Charlotte, my daughter Madison is doing genuinely better. The therapy is really helping her work through her issues. She asks about you sometimes, not seeking forgiveness or contact, just wondering how you're doing." Charlotte felt something soften slightly in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of release. "Tell her I'm doing well," she said. "Tell her I hope she finds real peace with herself." After Mrs. Taylor left, Sophie emerged from the back office with a knowing smile. "That was gracious of you to accept her sponsorship," she observed. Charlotte shrugged. "Holding on to anger takes energy and emotional resources. I need all that energy for creating and building something meaningful." The night before Fashion Week, Charlotte couldn't sleep at all. She stood on the small balcony of their Midtown hotel room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, feeling utterly overwhelmed by the unreality of her situation. Tomorrow, she would show her work at New York Fashion Week. Tomorrow, fat women who'd been systematically made invisible by the fashion industry would walk a professional runway while industry leaders and international press watched and judged. Tomorrow, the girl who'd been called Charlotte the Whale would prove that bodies like hers weren't just acceptable or tolerable. They were beautiful, powerful, absolutely worthy of celebration and investment. The terror was completely real and almost paralyzing. But so was her readiness. She thought about that journalist's question from the Teen Vogue interview months ago. What do you want your ultimate legacy to be? At the time, she'd given some polite, diplomatic answer about expanding size inclusivity in fashion. But the real answer, the true answer, was simpler and more personal. She wanted fat girls everywhere to see themselves on runways, in magazines, in beautiful clothes designed with genuine love and skill. She wanted them to know they didn't have to earn the right to be visible, that the world's impossibly narrow standards were the limitation, never their bodies. Fashion Week morning arrived bright and surreal and terrifying. The venue was massive, a converted warehouse in Chelsea with soaring industrial ceilings and professional lighting that could make anything look either magnificent or terrible. Charlotte's show was scheduled for 2 p.m. on the third day, prime placement for an emerging designer that indicated the organizer's genuine confidence in her work. Backstage was controlled chaos. Models getting hair and makeup done, Sophie managing logistics with military precision, and her characteristic calm. Miss Rosa making final minute adjustments to suits with her gnarled hands, moving carefully over expensive fabric. A professional backstage team Charlotte had never worked with before, coordinating everything. Charlotte moved through it all in a strange state of hyper-awareness, combined with dreamlike detachment. This was it. This was the moment she'd been unconsciously building toward, from those first sketches behind the lifeguard station to this converted warehouse in Manhattan. The moment that would either validate everything she'd built or reveal her as a fraud who'd gotten lucky. The audience filed in. Fashion journalists from major publications, buyers from department stores and boutiques, other designers, industry professionals whose opinions could make or break careers, and in the front row, Charlotte's mother, Miss Rosa, and her family, and surprisingly Madison Taylor, sitting very still and quiet, watching the runway with an expression Charlotte couldn't decipher from backstage. The lights dimmed dramatically. Music started. A track Sophie had carefully selected, all ocean sounds and building percussion and emotional swell. And then the first model appeared from backstage. It was Charlotte's mother, wearing maternal strength, moving down that runway with a grace and confidence that took Charlotte's breath away completely. The audience reaction was immediate and audible. Gasps of surprise, then building applause. Because what appeared on that runway wasn't apologetic plus-size fashion, tucked shamefully away in a separate section as an afterthought. It was genuinely beautiful, technically brilliant swimwear on a fat woman who wore it like armor and art combined, like she owned every inch of that runway and had every right to be there. Model after model walked, each one representing a different piece of Charlotte's collection, a different aspect of fat embodiment and celebration. The youngest model, 17-year-old Keisha from Charlotte's mentorship program, wore a vibrant tropical print two-piece with the kind of unself-conscious confidence that Charlotte had never possessed at that age, that she'd had to fight for and build slowly. An older woman named Dorothy, 67 years old, wore a sophisticated navy one-piece that proved elegance and style had absolutely no size or age limits. Women of different sizes, different ethnicities, different body types, different ages, all wearing Charlotte's designs like they'd been born to be seen and celebrated rather than hidden and minimized. The runway wasn't just fashion, it was revolution in fabric form, a direct challenge to every assumption the industry had made about whose bodies deserved beauty and investment. The audience was responding audibly now, with genuine enthusiasm rather than polite obligation. Charlotte could hear it from backstage and felt tears threatening. The final piece was Charlotte herself, which hadn't been part of the original plan. Sophie had insisted just days before, "Your personal story is fundamentally part of this collection's narrative. You need to own that truth publicly." So Charlotte appeared wearing the final look, a stunning white one-piece with gold detailing that she'd named New Beginning, representing transformation and hope. She walked to the end of the runway on shaking legs, looked out at the audience of industry professionals and press, and for one disorienting moment was transported back to being 13 years old, crying behind the lifeguard station, absolutely certain she would never be anything but the fat girl everyone mocked and dismissed. And now she was here at New York Fashion Week. She'd traveled from those rocks to this runway, from shame to triumph, from invisible to undeniable. The applause was absolutely thunderous, overwhelming. People stood, first a few individuals, then entire rows, then the entire audience on their feet giving her a standing ovation. Charlotte looked down at the front row and saw her mother crying openly, saw Miss Rosa clutching her chest with overwhelming emotion, saw Madison with tears streaming down her face. And Charlotte smiled, not a performance for cameras or approval, just genuine joy and satisfaction at what she'd built, what she'd proven, what she'd created from years of pain and persistence and stubborn refusal to accept others' limitations. The press coverage the next day was overwhelming in its scope and enthusiasm. Major fashion magazines called her collection revolutionary, necessary, the future of inclusive fashion design. Vogue's review described her work as technically brilliant swimwear that celebrates rather than apologizes for plus-size bodies. Business publications analyzed the untapped market opportunity she was capitalizing on. Buyers placed massive orders representing millions of dollars. International retailers from countries she'd never visited wanted exclusive partnerships and distribution rights. Her Instagram gained 87,000 new followers in 48 hours. But the moment that mattered most to Charlotte personally came 3 days after the show. She received an email from a woman named Patricia in Ohio. "I'm a 49-year-old fat woman who hasn't been swimming in 18 years because I was too ashamed of how I looked in a swimsuit, too afraid of judgment and cruel comments. I watched your Fashion Week show online and cried through the entire thing. I just ordered 4 of your designs. This summer I'm taking my granddaughter to the community pool for the first time ever. Thank you for making that possible. Thank you for showing me that I deserve to exist without apology." Charlotte read that email 7 times, crying through every reading, understanding that this specific impact on real women's lives was the point of everything she'd built. Within 18 months of Fashion Week, Charlotte's brand had expanded to 47 countries across 6 continents. She opened a flagship store in Los Angeles, then another in New York, then a beautiful flagship location in Sunset Beach, a gorgeous retail space overlooking the very beach where she'd spent her childhood and adolescence hiding behind the lifeguard station, convinced she was worthless. The Sunset Beach store's grand opening was a major town event covered by local and regional press. The mayor gave an enthusiastic speech about local entrepreneurship and Sunset Beach producing world-class talent. Mrs. Taylor, in a moment of public accountability, cut the opening ribbon while explicitly acknowledging how wrong she'd been about the market and about Charlotte. And Charlotte stood there in her own store, surrounded by the community that had once mocked her relentlessly, now celebrating her success and claiming her as their own, and felt the complicated satisfaction of vindication mixed with hard-won forgiveness. She'd transformed not just her own life trajectory, but the way her entire town and beyond thought about bodies, beauty, fashion, and belonging. She never forgot where she started or what that journey had cost her. The mentorship program expanded dramatically, now serving over 200 young, plus-size women across California and building chapters in other states. She established a substantial scholarship fund for plus-size students pursuing fashion design at both traditional schools and alternative programs. She used her growing platform and influence to advocate loudly for size inclusivity across the entire fashion industry, calling out brands that ignored plus-size consumers and celebrating those making genuine efforts at inclusion. And every summer, she hosted a free beach day event in Sunset Beach, where plus-size women and girls could try on her designs, get professional photos taken in them, and experience the pure joy of being at the beach without shame or fear of judgment. Hundreds of women and girls attended these events from across Southern California, and the photos from those days, fat bodies of all types in beautiful swimwear, laughing in the waves, playing in the sand, unashamed and magnificent and fully present, became some of the most powerful and emotionally resonant images in her brand's visual narrative. Charlotte returned to her rocks one evening in late summer, 3 years after that life-changing Fashion Week appearance. She was 21 now, running a multi-million-dollar international company, employing over 90 people, dressing plus-size women on 6 continents, being invited to speak at major conferences about entrepreneurship and body positivity. But sitting on these familiar stones, watching tourists and locals enjoy the beach in the golden California light, she felt most authentically herself. She pulled out a sketchbook. She still carried one everywhere as a habit, and began to draw. Not swimwear this time, but the scene unfolding in front of her, women of absolutely all sizes enjoying the beach together, children playing without self-consciousness, the eternal Pacific waves meeting sand. She titled the sketch, "Belonging," in careful letters, because that's what she'd ultimately created through years of work, not just clothes or a successful business, but tangible proof that fat bodies belonged everywhere without qualification. On beaches, on runways, in beautiful fabrics and bold patterns, in public spaces, in the world without apology or prerequisite weight loss or permission from anyone. Sophie found her there as the sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky orange and pink and gold. "Thinking about the next collection already?" she asked with knowing affection, sitting beside Charlotte in the sand. Charlotte smiled, still sketching. "Always thinking about the next thing, but also just remembering. That girl who used to hide here behind the lifeguard station, who thought she'd never be anything but invisible and worthless. I wish I could go back and tell her what's coming, that the pain won't last forever, that her weird obsession with sketching tourists' swimwear will become the foundation of something genuinely meaningful, that her body isn't her limitation, it's part of her story, her strength, her unique vision that nobody else could have developed." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "She knows now," she said softly, gesturing at Charlotte, at the successful woman she'd become. "You've shown her through everything you've built. You've shown all of them." And Charlotte realized it was profoundly true. Every swimsuit she designed with love and skill, every woman she dressed in garments that celebrated rather than concealed, every girl she mentored toward believing in her own worth and creative potential, it was all a direct message to her younger self, echoing across time. You were always worthy exactly as you were. They were always wrong about you. Your body was never the problem. Their failure of imagination was always the problem. Charlotte Reed transformed years of humiliation into an international fashion empire. But more importantly, she transformed shame into purpose and pain into power. The fat girl who learned to see beauty while being told she was ugly created a brand that now dresses hundreds of thousands of women who'd been made invisible by a fashion industry designed to systematically exclude them. She proved that margins are just spaces nobody bothered to look at carefully, that supposed limitations are usually just failures of imagination, and that bodies deemed wrong by impossibly narrow standards are actually perfectly right, exactly as they exist. If you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, if you've ever hidden from life because the world made you believe you didn't deserve to be seen or celebrated, remember Charlotte's story deeply. Your body is not your apology. Your space is not a burden to others. Your visibility is not contingent on meeting someone else's arbitrary standards. You belong exactly where you are, in the body you have right now. No prerequisites, no conditions, no apologies required. You deserve beautiful things, designed with love specifically for you. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about bodies and beauty and belonging and possibility, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and your own story. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about women who refuse to be small, who transform pain into power, who prove that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts if we choose to use them that way. Your story isn't over. Your transformation is absolutely possible, and you deserve to be seen and celebrated. I'll see you in the next one.